Welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall. Take a look at this. Axios' Barak, Ravid, and Marc Caputo have this exclusive. They say, as smoke and debris swirled over the Syrian presidential palace, the chatter in the West Wing grew louder, saying Benjamin Netanyahu is out of control. Axios quotes a White House official as saying, quote, Bibi acted like a madman. He bombs everything all the time. This could undermine what Trump is trying to do, unquote. Hal Kempfer is here. Hal, if the White House is partly fed up with Bibi, why don't they say it publicly? Or is this how they say it publicly? Through leaks and reports like this?
Actually, Austin, this probably is the way that you would put something like this out. You don't want to go out publicly on the record chastising Bibi Netanyahu, chastising Israel, if you will. We have a very good relationship with Israel. Obviously, we're probably their closest ally. We've been supporting them throughout this entire conflict, and that's a bipartisan thing. It was done under Biden, certainly being done under Trump. And so, all of that said, we don't want to break that. But with that, this kind of follows something rather interesting, which is we were chastising, there was a death of a Palestinian American due to what appears to have been the Israeli Defense Forces' hands in the West Bank. That has caused a lot of condemnation from the U.S., particularly from our ambassador there. And then, of course, the IDF hitting that Christian or that Catholic church, which was the only Catholic church in Gaza, destroying it, killing the priest who was very close to the late Pope Francis. And that has also caused a bit of ire with the U.S., and we have expressed that. And there's a certain frustration. I just want to kind of go back. President Trump took a strategic risk. I mean, it was almost within Middle Eastern terms, it would almost kind of seemed a little bit like Nixon goes to China. That he met al-Shara, the interim president of Syria, when President Trump was on his Middle East trip, shook his hands publicly, said, basically the U.S. is committed to helping Syria kind of rebuild again, took off some of the restrictions into getting aid, support, trade done with Syria to kind of almost normalize relations, if you will. We're not quite there yet, but it is slowly happening with that. And you have to remember al-Shara was a former al-Qaeda operative. So this is a huge shift, and not without some political risk for President Trump personally. And Netanyahu has launched these attacks, particularly this one that just took place that he says was to take pressure off the Druze that were in confrontation with the government forces. But this is right downtown Damascus. This is hitting major government buildings. This is, from our perspective, this is undermining a lot of the good work, if you will, the good faith work, working with the Syrians, trying to develop better relations. And then our biggest ally in the region hits them with something like this. That's probably what has spurred this, right now unofficial, but these, if you will, these, I don't know if you want to call them leaks or whatever, but unofficial condemnation of what Netanyahu is doing.
So Axios says a second senior U.S. official also pointed to, as you alluded to, the shelling of a church in Gaza this week, which led President Trump to call Netanyahu and demand an explanation. A live look at Jerusalem, by the way, as it's 11:22 there. Hal, I got to ask you. There was another quote in the Axios article, an official telling them, the feeling is that every day there is something new. What the F, they say to Axios. I also remember former President Biden saying the IDFs campaign was over the top last year, Hal. Now we're seeing stories like this leaking from the Trump administration. Is the IDFs campaign normal for a war, Hal? How do you measure such a thing?
Well, the IDF has destroyed in Gaza. They have, in terms of, is it normal for a war? It depends on which war you look at. In a big war, destroying enormous amounts of urban space, buildings, and things like that, that happens. I mean, if you look at Certainly Germany after World War II, the major cities in Germany, many of them were basically rubble. Berlin was basically rubble. And so that does happen. But if you look at a war like this, something that started out with October 7th and those attacks, systematically, and it has picked up in the last 6 months, if you will, that Israel has gone in and destroyed. They've cleared areas and then they've destroyed all the buildings in those areas. So there's no place for the Palestinians to ever go back to move back in. And they've done it in such a way that, and of course, they're openly talking about. They have a program where they're basically asking for Palestinian residents of Gaza to move to another country, and they're trying to find another country that will take them. But when you forcibly displace a population from where they are to someplace else, that is considered a violation of the law of war. That's considered a violation of the Geneva Convention. You're touching into areas that they normally define as linking into genocide or something like that. And there's been a lot of genocidal, not just from Palestinian pro-Palestinian activists, but from others saying that this is really getting into an area of international law when you have this amount of destruction and the forcible dislocation of the population in such a way. So it is. I don't know if it's unprecedented. There's been, I mean, if you look at the sheer numbers of people killed and you compare that to something like what happened in Cambodia back in the 70s, or certainly if you go back to what happened in World War II under Hitler with the Holocaust, the numbers in Gaza are not nearly that great. And so it doesn't fall into genocide by the numeric terms that you'd see there or the percentages you'd see there, but it has been very significant across the board.
Going back to the White House's seeming frustration with Netanyahu, could there be a point at which the White House may hit a breaking point with Israel, or is that something that they're going to avoid at all costs?
Well, I don't think President Trump is a little bit different. And sometimes when he makes a shift in a big way. So I can't rule anything out. But I don't think he's going to want to suddenly change longstanding U.S. policy towards Israel, nor does he want to do a big change, which would cause certainly political ramifications for him here at home. So I think they'll put pressure in various different ways on Netanyahu to change his course. But here's the problem: Netanyahu, and of course this is the situation, is when he leaves office, he is facing a lot of legal peril. Once he leaves office, there's a lot of court stuff that's going to happen that could land him in prison. So he does not want to leave office. He doesn't want to cease being the prime minister because of that legal risk that he faces. The other thing that's been happening more recently is he's lost a couple of key members, very orthodox religious parties in his coalition, and he has passed that number in the Knesset where he has a clear dominant majority that keeps his government in power. And so he's kind of in a limbo status right now. So there is some thought that some of these things you're seeing, in Syria and elsewhere might be to kind of shore up his more far right base in some ways, maybe attract them back in by saying, see what I'm doing here, sort of stuff. But the problem they have is that within Israel, they have ended a longstanding policy where they do not conscript Orthodox religious students into or scholars, I should say, into the military, and that has stopped, and that has really caused a massive rift with some of these more Orthodox Jewish parties, these more far right parties in Israel. So even though he's bombing downtown Damascus, I don't know that that's going to fix that systemic problem that he has politically within Israel to build a working coalition to keep him in power indefinitely.
Hal, we appreciate you being generous with your time this weekend. Hal is a retired Marine intelligence officer and the host of the Strat podcast. You can listen to it anywhere podcasts are available. Hal, good to see you. Talk soon.
All right. Good to see you, Austin. Thanks.